Brox. Welcome to today's masterclass. Well, as you know, 2020 has been a very interesting and challenging year for most of us, which makes today's session even more very topical for us. It's going to be a great session. We've got 5 L&D professionals who are going to share the challenges that they've faced and how they've adjusted with what they do. So I'm sure you're going to get plenty of really helpful tips to take away from today's session. So for now, I'm going to hand you over to Bill Gerard, who's our host, and he'll introduce the panel and take today's masterclass. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, so welcome everyone. I'm really delighted we've got such a good turnout for this session. We actually had someone booked to run us through a session today, but unfortunately she was unable to do it. So a couple of weeks ago when I had to pivot what we were doing, I thought what would be something really interesting to talk about in the penultimate masterclass that we've got. And having been in several, a whole bunch of masterclasses with a lot of our members, as well as the member lounges and talking to people directly, what I was seeing was that there was just a lot of really interesting stories about 2020 and what's been going on for individuals, different people. So I put a call out to about 18 people or so that I thought might be interested in sharing, and more than a dozen people stepped up to share their stories with us in this session. Unfortunately, time permits to only allow a certain number. So I've got 5 people that I've asked specifically to take us through, and I'm giving them about 9 or 10 minutes of overall time each that they can use any way they want. And then I'm going to throw it open to everybody to ask questions, do whatever, share with us if you want to do some stuff. So we want to have an open forum at the end of this session as well, because I know there's lots of really interesting stories out there. The ones I've selected are all quite different. They have different impacts, and I think you're going to find it really interesting. So that's the nature of what we're going to be doing. What I'd like to do is ask people to stay muted during the session. If you want to get the best impact from the speaker, I would suggest you go into speaker mode when we start that process. And if they're sharing slides, you can then get adjust your screen so that you can actually get a good size of the slide as well as the speaker themselves. And then we'll come back into gallery mode whenever we want to share discussions and all that. As we go as well, if you have anything you'd like to ask, and I'm going to traditionally hold questions to the end and part of that process, but if there's a question you really want to ask right now, put it in the chat box, or if there's something that you'd like to share with us later, just put your hand up and mention it and say, hey, I have a story I'd like to share later on, and I can call on you to do that. So that's basically the format for the process. I hope everybody is okay with that. Even if you're not, it's what's going to happen. So I don't know why I bothered to ask you, but it's just one of those things that we do. So what I've got is I've got 5 speakers that I'm going to with. We've got Sally Foley-Lewis is going to come up first, then Lyndall Box, then Nigel Grant from PEXA, and then Debbie Key from 40 Winks, and then Malcolm Simister is going to share his story with us. So let me start by introducing Sally. Many of you will already know Sally as well, and she has a really interesting story, very much like I think many people in the L&D field, but I wanted her to share with us what happened with when COVID hit, how was she impacted, how did she react, what did she pivot, what lessons did she learn, and maybe what does she see going forward? And that's really the same thing for each person. So Sally, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Bill. And there's a storm here, so I might be freaking out a little bit. Just to put that out there, just so you're aware. When mid-March rolled around, one of the things that I was doing, because I have a foot in the camp of a professional speaker, and I'm also a member of Professional Speakers Australia. And let's face it, half of Professional Speakers Australia are facilitators anyway. So we need to pull them over to ILP, just saying. But in mid-March, I was at Professional Speakers Australia's annual conference in Adelaide. I'm based in Brisbane. And a beautiful surprise, I was actually awarded the 2020 Breakthrough Speaker of the Year. And as I stood on stage, realizing that our country was about to go and close down, in my acceptance speech, I actually said, this is a little bit ironic given this award for speaking, and I'm about to not have any speaking for the foreseeable future. And so it was a really sort of weird experience to not only get that award, but to also watch other speakers and facilitators just like en masse react to the news that we were about to be hit and have to get home to our respective states and cities and towns and deal with what we had to deal with. And it didn't really hit me like it did some others. I continued on the weekend. Actually, some people left that night and tried to book themselves on flights and get out of Adelaide and get back to their towns. I hung out for the rest of the conference, and maybe I'm a little slow. That might be it, but I was still determined to enjoy it. I hadn't, my flight was still going to get me home in time for when we were told to be home. So I thought, I'm here, let's make the most of it. And it was when I got home in that first week, I lost about 12 gigs into emails. And so I was actually going into that weekend with Professional Speakers Australia, looking at my best quarter ever being in business. And I've been in business about 10 years. And that just went out the door instantly. And I'm not alone with that. And I know people were hit worse. But even then I've just gone, oh, well, can't control it. Don't like it, but I can't control it. And my focus went to, well, what can I do? And I just instantly reached out to all my top clients, and I rang them and just said, you know what to do from a workplace health and safety pivot, word of the year pivot. You know what to do to get people physically okay and back set up working. What can I do for you as a leader? And so over the course of probably 3 to 6 months, I was doing one-on-one coaching, I was doing management group coaching, and I was doing some team sessions all around what it is you need to do to be productive, what it is you need to be able to get on with what you do, what are the ones, sharing a few jokes around, bad things we see on Zoom, getting teams to look at ways in which they communicate differently. And I did not charge any money for that. Didn't tell my husband that, just so you know. I didn't charge any money. And so it wasn't probably until the June mark where I realized that was actually my therapy. That was actually my way of coping with what was happening. Because it wasn't until probably I see I've frozen. Okay, I'll just keep talking because we're being recorded. It wasn't until mid-June where I realized just how bad the situation had been, and that I was starting to panic about, my business. And so that's when I started reaching out again and aiming to book in some engagements and some facilitation and things like that. And so from that point on, what I didn't realize what I was doing was actually creating much better relationships and creating much stronger relationships with my existing clients. And I was also building that resilience within myself, which I didn't realize I needed, but I absolutely did need. And so it was sort of by default that all seemed to come together. And I don't necessarily recommend that as a strategy for anyone else. It's not something that I spent a lot of time thinking about. It was truly reactionary. And, bits of it worked and bits of it didn't. But what has come out the other end of that is I've got some really good quality, better relationships with some of my top clients, and I'm now doing a lot more work with them because of that, maybe, but definitely the timing was there, the opportunity presented itself, and I was the one that was front and center for them. I realized that a lot of people were hurting, and that to ask them to pay for services just didn't sit right with me. I knew that people just wanted someone to be on the end of the phone, even if it was venting. And so one of the other strategies that I was doing at the same time was sending out information around, have you tried this? Try that, try this. This is one way I'm seeing people engage with people. Have you tried reviewing what you're doing now that you're online versus in the workplace? And a lot of the email replies I was getting from people were things like, you know, this is really helpful. I tried this and this worked. That was really great. I tweaked it a bit and did it this way. And the other thing that I did, which I sense is actually quite Australian, is every email had some humor at the bottom of it. And I just said humor is healthy because, you know, Australians too soon with a bit of their humor at times. However, I think that's a little bit iconic of who we are. And so I would send some of, a bit of a funny meme at the end of every email. And I would get I'd get some responses like, that joke was the best thing. It's been a sanity saver. Please keep sending these. And so I think when it comes to us as facilitators and people who serve others, we must never, 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 never forget the small things. And that we are actually making a difference, even though we may never know that we are. And interestingly, a client who I have always wanted to maintain contact with, and I know that probably every blue moon they'll come around and engage me. I think it was about 3 or 4 emails into that cycle of reaching out to everyone. They came back to me and they said, I have been trying to answer your emails. I need you to do some work with us. I love getting your emails generally, despite COVID. And so it was that extra push as well that I didn't realize I was doing to say, don't do this on your own. You've got some help here. I'll finish up by just saying that was my strategy. It certainly did not boost anything on the bottom, on the balance sheet, on a profit and loss kind of side of things. A lot of loss, not a lot of profit. But I certainly put a lot of credit in the bank with my clients. And it did a lot of good for me. I don't think I would have been as mentally healthy if I'd probably tried to do anything else or tried to push through selling. To me, when you push like that, you kind of, dogs can smell fear, and I reckon humans can smell desperation. So that pushing and being salesy just doesn't cut it with me. So that's what I did. That's how I ended out. And I think I'm coming out the other end of it fairly, not too many bruises. So that's me.
Fantastic, Sally. Thank you very much for that. We'll come back and ask some more questions about going forward with everybody else, but thank you very much for that. You can go on mute now if you like, and Lyndall, you can come off mute. Lyndall Box is a friend of mine here in Geelong, and she runs a little meetup group that I highly recommend people get involved with, called LB Learning Meetup. Well, it's not a meetup anymore, it's now a LinkedIn process, but I connect with Lyndall, and we've been able to go beyond Geelong now, etc. But I wanted Lyndall to share her story as well, because again, relatively new into the L&D space the last couple of years, and the impact on what had happened with that. And her particular passion and interest is also fascinating for me. So Lyndall, I'll turn that over to you if you like, and you can introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thanks. And thanks for going to the trouble of signing up to trial out using live captioning today. So if anyone is interested in having a go, it's not 100% perfect. You might have noticed that Kerry had an orphan dog she didn't know she had was an orphan earlier. So its interpretation is not entirely accurate, but it's a bit of fun to play with, but particularly helpful if you can't have the sound turned up and you want to still be able to figure out what's going on. I'm going to share my screen because I do like to play with tools, not just captioning tools, but also other ones. And I decided I'd resurrect a tool for today that I've used some years ago and hadn't used for a while. So we'll see if that's going to work all right or not. Hopefully on your screen, you're going to see a full page picture of 2020, a year of challenge and change, and my face looking a little bit scared. Beautiful. That's what I'm hoping for. Excellent. So I'm guessing the reason that Bill chose me to speak today is because I'm a learning professional, just like all of you. But interestingly, I have been an employee for most of that time. I was 15 years adult learning most recently, and 10 years before that working in secondary schools, working for other people. And in 2015, I moved myself to Geelong. And just a bit of background about that, the stuff that matters to me, as Bill's already alluded to, I'm very passionate about accessible learning and human-centered design. So that's where all of my business stuff comes from, and all of my passions and burning desires to want to make things more inclusive for everyone. But I also love to run, and I like to organise stuff, and I'm a Eurovision tragic. And I share ideas all the time, which is part of the reason why I run that learning meetup group that Bill mentioned before too. And if you haven't already connected with me, I'll probably reach out and try to connect with you, because that's the type of thing that I do. So anyway, how did it all start? I started myself a business, and my business only started in 2018. It's very new. And being a learning professional for a very long time, I was quite comfortable in that space, but certainly not comfortable in running a business. So at the end of 2018, I set myself up with a lovely little arrangement with Genu Training here in Geelong, where I worked for them 4 days a week as an employee. And on that other day of the week, I started my business. And very raw in that business space, lots to learn, and I still have a lot to learn, but it was a nice way of easing into it. And by about the middle of 2019, I was riding high, I was doing really well, and I had so many things on the go that I needed to start to rethink that employee arrangement. Unfortunately, at the same time, my mum got a bit ill and she lives in Bendigo. So it gave me that final kick to say, I can do away with this employee thing and give myself more flexibility and move into running my business full time. So as a learning consultant, I started to look at all those things that I needed to do, like growing on social media. And those of you who've seen Hubert out there, he's espousing my values all the time on learning and accessibility and inclusion. Kept working on those networks and started talking to some people in Geelong about contracts, because most of the contracts I'd acquired up until then were from capital cities, interestingly. And I also started working on Geelong Design Week, which I hosted an event for, was working on hosting an event for, with a whole lot of workshops planned to follow up. But of course, as we know, at the beginning of 2020, that's when COVID hit. And with all of those grand plans and everything in mind, and all of that work harnessing on Geelong Design Week, things got really quiet all of a sudden. In fact, all of the clients that I was talking to, like me, were a bit concerned about what this COVID thing might mean, and they stopped talking. And with Geelong Design Week only 2 weeks away, we received our first containment instructions where we weren't allowed to have events of more than 500 people. And 1 week out, it was containment down to no more than 100 people. So by the time we were a week away from presenting for Geelong Design Week, which you can see was meant to be face-to-face at the library in Geelong, we already had the City of Geelong cancelling all of Geelong Design Week and the library shutting down. So with a week to go, and one of my presenters, who is blind and a JAWS screen reader user, due to present, we pivoted in a very quick way, grabbed all those registrations and got people to sign up to a webinar. We decided to trial a few different things, and we tried some live captioning on the day through Google Docs, and we adapted our activities as best as we could. It was pretty rough, but everyone was really receptive, given that, you know, it had happened so quickly, and we still managed to get through it. What didn't happen, of course, is the follow-up stuff. So I couldn't run any of the accessibility workshops I wanted to run, and people just didn't really want to talk about moving to online just yet. And what I also noticed that was happening is that there was a lot of noise on social media. It scared me a little bit, because I noticed that people like me who were just starting out in business were starting to offer things for free. And I'm so glad to hear that it's worked so well for you, Sally, but I was so scared of doing that. I thought that potentially with a new business like mine, that I might offer my services for free, and then people might expect that I continue to do that. And I really started to think through what it meant for me, given that most of my clients were small or medium businesses, that they weren't really in a space to afford anything for a while. So I laid low, and I rang my old employer at Genu, who I hadn't sort of seen for a little while, but at Genu Training here in Geelong, their learners are very mixed ability learners, and they've got a human connection with their learners, and such a brand based around face-to-face connection, that I figured if they're going to have to go online, they might need some help. And when I called them, they said, "Can you start Monday?" So that's what I did. I returned to an employee relationship for a bit of financial security, to make sure that I could continue to pay my way for myself, and also to give me that sense of purpose where I had nothing going on, and then all of a sudden I had the potential to make a good contribution. So that was initially a 3-month contract, 4 days a week, with 1 day a week to work on my business. And that 3-month contract got extended a few times, and I'm still there. So the current contract's due to finish on the 6th of November. And hopefully, well, I know it's been a win-win for both of us, and a really great relationship, a good indicator of how important it is to never burn your bridges. So what does that mean right now? What's the normal? Interestingly, people are talking again. And with the containment measures lifting a little bit in Victoria, people are starting to get bold and making, you know, arrangements to spend their money again, and interest is picking up in my business. And I figure that's probably time for a change. So Bill asked us to talk about what the lessons learned have been, and interesting lessons for me this year. And perhaps that old adage of change is constant couldn't have been more true. But the one thing that I keep harnessing on and keep reflecting on is just how important the human connection has been this year, and it's been reinforced so strongly. That human connection for me it speaks both personally and professionally, and how important it is. And I have an accountability buddy who actually she's here today, Pat. So thanks for joining us in, Pat. But that accountability relationship we set up well before COVID, and I can't say how important it has been to keep that going through this period of time. We set actions for ourselves and support and nudge each other and challenge each other all the time, but that level of personal connection has been critical to get through some pretty tough experiences. And also the friendships. I've got some friends here too, Anita and Mike, and thank you for coming along and joining us today. But those learning mentor, collaborator and friendships that we have are really special to me, and I value them more than ever now. And for our learners, I noticed that Bill was talking about, some time ago, was talking about how when we pivoted to online, people were using either meetings or masterclasses or webinars to present their learning. And interestingly, webinars weren't as engaging as people thought they might be. Well, I suppose that's not a surprise when we realise that mostly with webinars, it's really hard to connect at a human level. And I think that's been the biggest learning. It's been wonderful. Something else that I've learned is about riding the waves, and some of us experienced some really financial hardship this year, and it's been pretty tough. But what I've noticed is that when someone's up, someone else might be down, and vice versa, and usually the one who's up pulls the other one up, and we manage to keep riding the waves together. So if the tide's been out for you a little bit this year, I'm certain that good times are on the way. And another learning, being remote and regional is no obstacle. I can do anything in Geelong. I can connect with people in Brisbane, like I've been doing in my learning meetup, or you can have worldwide contacts, and it's just magnificent. And people are receptive to that more than ever now, which is great. But the biggest thing for me, and this is my passion, of course, is that digital accessibility as part of the conversation now. So with that greater sense of community and our levels of need, people are receptive to co-design and co-research and user-led development more than they've ever been. And I noticed that clients are really keen to talk about user experience and digital accessibility and inclusion at the beginning of the discussion instead of wanting to tack it on at the end. So this is something I never get bored of talking about. And if you want to connect with me, if you aren't already, let's continue the conversation. So that's my year of challenge and change.
Fantastic, Lyndall. Thanks, Lyndall. Fantastic. Thank you for that. And I'm enjoying the captions. I've got my subtitles turned on. So for those who haven't seen it yet, the closed caption down in the navigation bar, you can put those on if you want, or hide them, and it just shows you another way of communicating. So thank you for that, Lyndall. Nigel, I'd like you to come on now, if you wouldn't mind. Nigel wishes he had been able to get to a barber before today, but as you, like many of us. But I wanted Nigel to share his story because he works with PEXA, Property Exchange Australia. And it's a really unique organization. And I think that what happened as a result of COVID with their organization, and then what that meant overall, is something we're after. So Nigel, I wanted you to share your story, but also the story of what the impact has been of this whole thing for you personally, but also for your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the introduction there, Bill, and appreciate that. I'm intrigued to see how the closed caption works with my Kiwi pronunciation of vowels, because I'm pretty sure it'll struggle with a few things. But let me share a screen and just a boring old slide pack. Let's do that. And the reason I started with this is I thought it might be a good opportunity to introduce myself to a few of you that I haven't been able to engage with. I'll get to the reason why I haven't been able to engage with in the next couple of slides. But my name's Nigel Grant. I studied education at the University of Auckland, but really probably just played rugby a lot and drank a few too many beers, as most people do at university. But I always had this feeling that education and developing people was where I wanted to be. And this year is actually my 18th year in learning and development. So incredibly lucky at my age. I'm not going to say how old, but there is greys and a relatively strong receding hairline. So you'll know that I've been in for a while. But I've been in it my entire career. That career's gone across lots of different industries. So I started out in telecommunications in the early 2000s when we were absolutely charging people too much money. I've worked in banking, consulting, executive education, project delivery, settlement services, and very excited to see my good friend Bernie on the phone today, and also in property as well. One of the cool things for me is I've been incredibly fortunate in my career to work and live overseas. So I've obviously worked in New Zealand, or Aotearoa, which is the Māori name for New Zealand. I've worked in Egypt, Thailand, India, the Philippines, and here in your wonderful country. And currently I'm the head of member training capability and knowledge at PEXA, and I do really miss my barber. I live in the north of Melbourne, and there's plenty of bearded people here in Brunswick, and they're more organised than me. So Lyndall, I might get you on the line to do a bit of organisation with my barber, please. So I really, really miss them. So the reason that I thought I'd give an introduction to myself is I had all intent to attend basically any ILP event I could this year. We had a fantastic session in our office at the start of this year, and was incredibly excited to get stuck into this fantastic community that we're all a part of. Before I move on to the impact of COVID, I just want to give you an insight into who PEXA is, or Property Exchange Australia. So I'll just move one on. So we really are a world first, and the world first being if anybody's bought or sold a property, and we're currently selling our little cottage in Brunswick, you know that there's a heavy reliance on paper and other documentation, and a large community of legal practitioners and conveyancers, and also financial institutions as well. So we were the world first in bringing all of that together in a digital solution, and we support the $7 trillion. I still sometimes sit back and just say that word and realize the scale of the work that we do. We support the residential property market here in Australia. So I have experience in the settlement industry previously, which is why I'm so excited to see my friend Bernie here today. And I remember what settlement rooms were like. They were incredibly busy spaces. The cohort of people that did that work was advanced in age in some circumstances, and they were working in an industry that had been the same for over 100 years. And we fundamentally disrupted that industry through some government legislation, which led to our creation. And currently we've got more than 9,000 members, over 150 financial institutions, and lots of other numbers and bits and pieces in there. The reason that I give you that is it gives you context to the situation that we collectively, all of us collectively, found ourselves in March. It's interesting, Lyndall, that you mentioned webinars lacking that human element. One of the first things I said to my direct line manager at PEXA was, we have an over-reliance on webinars in this organisation. How can we connect with our learners when and where they need us if we're just scheduling a webinar for someone to get their CPD points? That was my thought in early January, and then COVID hit. What happened when COVID hit was, I'm just going to put some bullet points on the next screen, a lot. This year has just been an absolute blur. So I joined PEXA at the end of last year, and I left a department of 53 on and offshore for a telecommunications company. So I've become incredibly accustomed to having people do things for me, setting strategic direction, and dabbling in facilitation because I can never leave a classroom. I love it. I went into PEXA because the opportunity was too good to pass up, and I found that the travel was incredibly difficult with my young family. I've got a 4.5-year-old son. He was only a couple of weeks old when I worked with Bernie. And I thought, I want to be closer to home. And I didn't really enjoy having that number of direct reports all over the place. It provided some challenges, particularly with the offshore side of things. You know, having I won't name the telecommunications company, but having conversations with staff in the Philippines about doing drugs in a country where you get shot dead in the street for doing drugs, you know, that's a difficult conversation to have. And the health system there was pretty horrific, and a few of my team members actually unfortunately passed away because of those experiences. So I thought, oh, you know what, I'll come back and predominantly work in Australia in an industry that I know. This will be fantastic. And then COVID hit. We do a lot of our work face-to-face, so we have a field team that goes out to small, medium and large legal practitioners and assist them with the transactions within PEXA. And that team basically had to go from face-to-face meetings through to digital transition pretty much overnight. The reason that I put that there first was that there was a huge reliance on myself and my team to really get the team to understand what digital engagement was, its limitations, and some of its benefits too. So we went through a process of really engaging with what best practice was, and then supported that group of people as they went through that transition too. So that was the internal digital transition. And given that basically anywhere that had people was not allowed to operate, all of those settlement rooms that were still operating in places that weren't mandated for electronic conveyancing were all shut down. So we had to do a lot of work with basically every single bullet point that we've got here. So I'll go through them really slowly and tell you a few anecdotes over all of them. The reason that I've put all of these bullet points here is it's really shown me this year the importance of being a strategic partner to the business that you operate within. So I come from the employee perspective and have always tried to show an organization how our function can be a value add, and it's really come to the fore in this year. So we operate a group of official learning partners, which are tertiary providers and industry bodies that provide our learning to their members as well. And we actually signed up 3 new official learning partners during this time. So TAFE South Australia, TAFE New South Wales, and another CPD provider called Leo Cusson. And the really big challenge there is that that model of the train the trainer model for those official learning partners, for those tertiary providers, was heavily based on classroom facilitation. So the transition from a 2.5-day intensive involving system interactions and all sorts of different bits and pieces had to really rapidly be transitioned to online. And that brings me to my next point, which is the lack of human element in webinars. We reviewed what it was that we were going to be able to do and how we could engage with our audience. And our audience actually always clamors for webinars for some reason. I don't know what it is about lawyers and bankers, but they just seem to enjoy webinars. And this year, my team and my team is I'm one of 3, 3 members of the team. We've delivered over 50 webinars this year. And if anyone wants to put in the chat box, we've got 9,000 members. I want you to have a guess how many total participants we've had in those webinars over that period of time. 50 webinars. Tell me how many attendees you think we might have. Just stab in the dark. Just chuck a couple of numbers in there. 10%. No, a bit higher than that. 1,000. A bit higher than that. 4,500. We've trained over 11,000 or had over 11,000 attendees to our sessions. Glad it's high. Thanks, Silly. Appreciate that. So over 11,000 attendees to our webinars this year. The reason that we have that is whenever we introduce a new document into the system or a new process, that fundamentally changes the way that somebody completes their work, and they're looking for that outlet to ensure that they're able to perform that task. So we deliver webinars as one of the ways that we engage within our learning ecosystem. And we're incredibly lucky that we've got a great deal of data and a really well-resourced data team, because one of the things we've been able to use with the attendance of the webinars, but also through service tickets coming into our member support teams and other degrees of interaction that we have. We've been able to use that data to really identify the learning needs of different segments within our user base, and then provide dedicated learning to meet the need that they're either having or that we've identified for them. So that's been really, really exciting for us. I'm just going to cough for 1 second, so please excuse me. So we've really noticed the power of data, and one of the benefits of working for a large-ish organisation is being able to utilise that data to really meet those learning needs and identify what those learning needs are in the first place as well. We also, as a part of the being a strategic partner of this organisation, have been involved with the go-to-market process for all of our products within our organisation. There was previously an engagement model which was, hey, we've built this thing, can you run a webinar on it next week? And I am very, very used to that model of learning, or being the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, or perceived as the white knight on the horse. And we were able, because of the data that we had and some of the results that we'd got relatively quickly in that transition, to be able to really make ourselves not order takers within the organisation, but real strategic partners. So the degree of engagement that we have from a design point of view and a learning design point of view is actually much, much earlier in the process than it's previously been. And that's, again, had huge benefit for us when we talk to engaging with a very diverse audience, all the way from, banking professionals through to large law firms, through to the people that, run a small conveyancing practice off their kitchen bench in their house. So that's been incredibly beneficial for us. Sorry, just watching time, I always get that, sorry, Bill. We also do prototyping as an organisation, fast, quick experiments to see what works. So we involved in that heavily, which has been exciting. We've got a social learning platform that's self-moderated. I never ever thought I would say that, given my time in telecommunications, but that's a fantastic space. We've added knowledge management as a function this year. It's incredibly important for us to have a source of truth when you're dealing with legal documentation and the transaction of somebody's house. The other things that we've got on the right-hand side is micro-learning. I promised my boss that I would shake up the way we engaged our learners, and said, there's this great thing that where it works, it'll work. And we did a couple of little tests and samples on micro-learning, and we actually did that with the ACT, so a new jurisdiction, and we did that with the ACT internal for our internal training. So rather than sitting in a virtual forum at 4 to 5 at the end of the day for our people that have been on the phones all day at home by themselves, we created a micro-learning model where they could watch small videos, create a little few assessments, get those results, little groups of people talking and catching up afterwards. South Australia is another example of a jurisdiction that had to go digital straight away. So their settlement rooms closed, and we had to get a large number of that user group up to speed with even using the PEXA platform. So we had people that had never really even used the computer. We call them non-digital natives. And all the way through to super users that we had to get with more nuanced documents that are available there as well. Whilst we did that, we also changed the way that we complete the financial settlement process. We did a virtual induction. We heavily invested into e-learning, and I had to listen to my own voice, given that we had so many webinars throughout this year, and do a lot of video editing too. And I'll just finish with a couple of my insights. The reason that I put all those bullet points there is that this year's really highlighted to me that in our field, it's so just critically important to be a strategic partner of the organisation you're working with, or the organisation that you're working for. There was no way that we would have been able to achieve the learning outcomes that we've been able to achieve this year if we were perceived as the would you like fries with that, take this order type of function within our industry. The thing for me that really shocked me is I mentioned that I used to have a department of 53. My little team of 3, we've delivered more this year than I did in the 3.5 years that I did at the telecommunications company I worked with previously. And the other real thing for me was that it really showed a couple of things. You need to be incredibly adaptable and meet your learners' needs where and when they need it, which is why we've done such a suite of different processes and engagement models. And you need to have empathy and humor in your design. So when Sally mentioned the humor, dad jokes are terrible, but when we're all going through terrible processes, a little dad joke from Nige sitting in his front room in Brunswick, you know, can help people get through the day. And the other thing that I'll just mention as well, when we talk to the human element that you mentioned, Lyndall, that has just become so much more important. And the thing that's really resonated with me this year is I got into this because I love being around people and I've been stuck inside all year. But that human connection can absolutely happen in so many different forums. And I've been incredibly grateful to the organization that I work with, the people that we engage with from a learning point of view, and even just the ILP on the periphery, because I've wanted to attend everything, but I just have had no time. So having an organization like ILP there and supporting and just being that little comfortable pillow that you can cuddle when you need because other people are going through the same process has just been absolutely fantastic. So thank you. I appreciate the cuddle. But that's been our year. It's been just a huge year. It's been incredibly taxing on myself personally from a family point of view. My poor son in a little cottage, you know, being quiet for an hour while dad talks to some lawyers and bankers about the notice of death document in New South Wales. That's not the definition of fun. So the work-life balance has also been something that's really come to the fore, and I'm incredibly grateful to work for an organisation that really supports us on that as well. So that's me for today, team. Sorry if I went over time, but yeah, I should have mentioned that that's always what I do. So sorry about that. Maybe I need to go to more courses. Anyway, cheers.
Thanks, Nige. You can stop sharing your screen now. I just wanted to pick up on one other point. When you and I had a discussion, one of the things you mentioned was that with the PEXA and the way you were doing it, that in many ways it's been able to sustain and in fact boost the whole property market. You've
Correct,
been,
yeah.
keep that afloat, which is, you know, so it's beyond just the personal thing. It's actually all of those South Australian partners couldn't have done those exchanges if it hadn't been there. And one of the things we know about Australia is that its property market is vital to our well-being.
$1 trillion industry, and you know, we're incredibly grateful and with a large amount of humility in the way that we've been able to support that industry. So yeah, it's been a great year. Difficult, but great year.
Yeah, because I just thought that was a really interesting observation. So thank you for that.
Appreciate it.
Deb, it's over to you. I'm going to let Deb Key take on now. Deb's been a good partner, a good supporter of IOP in a number of different ways, and working at 40 Winks, she has a unique experience because obviously 40 Winks have got franchises all over the country. And some have been impacted in quite different ways. And in dealing with those, I've asked Deb to share the stories about what happened and how did you react, and what were some of the ways in which you were able to, I guess, work with people in quite different situations. So over to you.
Yes, well, I'm going to share my screen and I'll walk you all through the story. So when I went looking, hopefully everybody can see that. Always forget to do the check, like I just assume it's happening. So, all right, when I went to put the presentation together, I thought, oh, geez, what images am I going to show? And I went straight to the marketing pool of all of these beautiful images, and I actually fell onto these two, and I thought, here we go. This is COVID perfect. On the left-hand side of the screen, we've got our nice cozy home. We're all comfortable, lights are on, beautiful sky, and then all of a sudden COVID hits, and we're out in the middle of the ocean on our own with barely a path to get to the house because we're all in lockdown and there is no escape. You know, you step out of the house and you're in the water. So that's just me and my unique sense of humour coming to play in that regard. So who are 40 Winks? We are a franchise network, as Bill said. We've got 65 franchisees, and I don't think any of them are on the call. So whatever you do, don't share this with franchisees, but they're all fairly much of a mature age, and they're all of a fairly, I'm generalizing here, of a white male demographic. So it's an interesting group of people to work with, because being in learning and development, it's not something that they think is necessarily important or needed or wanted within their environment. So I've been in the role almost 2 years, and in that 2 years I have been working with these 65 franchisees and the 104 stores that they own across Australia. So they are all independently owned stores. They are not, we are the franchisor, but it's a very loose relationship, I suppose. It's not like a McDonald's where McDonald's can go, you know what, every store must do this and they must, you know, fall into line. We don't do that with our guides. They run their stores, they run their businesses, they have their own responsibilities. We just collect them together and we do some marketing for them and branding, etc. Those 104 stores have 600 team members, so it's not a big pool of people. And when you look at when you break that down into the individual stores, you may have as few as 3 people working in a store, and probably the majority of people working in the store would be around 12 or 13. So they're not large teams. There's not a lot of, you know, interaction even between those small teams, because they're all covering extensive hours that, you know, some of us haven't had recently in regards to lockdown, but, you know, they're working 7 days a week, and it's, you know, 9 to 5 on most days and 9 to 9 on those Thursdays and Friday nights. So it's a lot of hours to cover. To support that group of people, we've got 27 people who work in our National Support Centre, or head office, as most people would know it as. So I came into the business 2 years ago as the Learning and Development Manager. I've since been promoted to Head of Learning and Development, so I now sit on the executive table, and I'm constantly a part of that discussion and at the front of things, instead of being, as Nigel very well said, you know, being the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. I now know about things much earlier. It's very invigorating. It may not necessarily help sometimes, but it's nice to know what's going on. And that is a fantastic thing, not just for learning and development, but also for me personally, because when I stepped into that role, I was the only woman on an all-male executive team. And so I've been able to start having those diversity and inclusion conversations. So we also introduced in my role our 40 Winks Learning League, and you'll see that I've won a couple of ILP awards there, many LearnX awards, and we also in February became a bronze organisation for the Chief Learning Officer Learning Elite Awards, which I was very excited to be flying off to the United States, to Florida in late February to pick up this award. And of course, it just didn't happen. I got told by the CEO that I wasn't allowed to fly. He wasn't going to allow it. And then of course they had to cancel it and do it all through virtual webinars anyway. So what is the 40 Winks story? What happened? Now, please do not pay much attention to the numbers in this timeline. The big numbers, yes, the small numbers, no. But of course, March 26th, we all got our initial stay home instructions, and that's when we went into that first lockdown period. So all of our stores actually remained operational through that period, which was quite a surprise to us. We had quite a few of our franchisees say, you know what, I think I'm going to shut the doors anyway. And when they started having those conversations with their team members and, you know, this is what we're expecting to happen, we were fully expecting our sales to plummet, and they did. And all of the National Support Centre team immediately went into reduced hours and reduced pay. So for some people, that meant they went from a full-time 5-day-a-week job to a day. Somebody even went to half a day. So that was absolutely devastating for that that team. But also with the reduced time, they still needed to support those stores that were open. So it was quite a challenging time for all in this first instance. 3 weeks into stay at home though, all of a sudden our sales elevated, and not just a little bit, they went through the roof. It was almost like, and we still believe very firmly in this, that because people couldn't travel, they've decided that they're going to buy the best mattress they could ever buy and have that hotel comfort in their own homes. Fantastic. So all of a sudden we're going, oh, this is unexpected. What do we do with this? Because everything was all about the downturn. How do we work with this? And we had to we constantly had to think on our feet. But come May 15th, the NSC team did return to full-time employment right across the board, all 27 members. And between, the mid-April and the 15th of May, people were coming back and doing more hours as required. So the marketing team were needed more. The learning and development team, which there's, you've got 3 people, Nigel. I'm so jealous, let me tell you. I have 3 people, but it's me, myself, and I. And all 3 of us don't necessarily get on well all the time. So, I was desperately hunkered down and doing all of this work, which just seems to still overflowing at this point in time. But we'll go through that as we continue. Now, that brings us to August the 2nd. August the 2nd, after a little bit of a lull, we come out of lockdown and everything looked great. We got back to the gym. We could do some things. We could even, go out and eat in establishments. Dictator Dan got his thoughts together and he decided that we would go into lockdown completely in our metropolitan Melbourne area. And this created different dynamics for us as a head office team, because all of a sudden we had a complete group of stores, and there is 16 stores within our Melbourne metropolitan area that were in lockdown, and those people, this is their livelihoods. This is not, a corporate business just having to, close down a few office stores. This is their livelihoods. This is how they make their income. This is how they put food on the table for their children, and, it's not just their livelihoods, it's the team members as well. So we had a lot of, I spent a lot of time personally just speaking to people, and this is, both Sally and Lyndall and Nigel all been talking about human, and I did a lot of that. And it wasn't from a learning perspective. It was really coming at just a friend. How can I help you? Use my ear, use my shoulder, whatever it was. It was just a humanistic thing to do. And it was completely necessary, because these people had, they thought the rug was being pulled out back in March. Now it was absolutely, their world was being pulled out from underneath them. But the rest of the world still went on. The rest of the country was still in normal mode. And in fact, they were more than in normal mode. They had sales that were elevating. Western Australia, talking to the guys, the teams over there, it's almost as if the whole COVID thing really didn't happen. They just, really, was there something going on? Because we didn't see, they didn't have the effect. They have not gone into lockdown. They have, nothing. And they've stayed open, but their sales have increased. So there's sort of, nothing's changed, but all of a sudden we're doing better. Which brings us back to, where we're sort of at now. And our stores have been ready to reopen, I reckon, for probably 6 weeks. Since we were supposed to open 6 weeks ago, our stores had been dark opening, as they call it, for a week or two before the last 6 weeks. And they have been, don't tell anybody this, but they have been in their stores actually making sure that the stores are pristine and ready to go, and all of the COVID safe plans are in place and everything's sanitized, and they know exactly what's happening. But what's been interesting through the whole process with the Melbourne Metro lockdown is that our online sales, particularly for Melbourne Metro, have gone through the roof. And all of a sudden we now have a business that, who can sell mattresses online? Yes, we know koalas out there. Don't buy their mattresses. They're not very good. All right. I didn't say that out loud, did I? But you need to come in and try the mattress. You need to know that you have the right support and the right comfort, and price is that negotiable thing. You can't compromise on these things. But all of a sudden we're getting sales come through our online store that the stores were not prepared for. They just didn't realize that they could actually make these sales through the stores, through the online store. And, the whole point of our online presence initially, when the board approved it whenever it was, 8, 9, 10 years ago, was that will bring people into our bricks and mortar store. And what this has done is it's absolutely changed the paradigm of the Melbourne Metro store owners going, you know what, we probably do need to have this online store, because it's actually not only helping us through this period, because it kept quite a few of them afloat, but it actually now gives them a different way to work with the customer, and it creates that whole customer experience, that digital customer experience, as well as a bricks and mortar in-store customer experience. Which brings us to today, where all of our stores are very pleased to be open. I've spoken to many of them this morning, and they're just you can hear the joy in their voices. And just interestingly, on November 10th, you may or may not be aware, but Click Frenzy, which is the world's largest online sale, is going to hit, which is just like, that's just disturbing, because we've just come out of lockdown. We don't want people to go back online for Click Frenzy. We want them to come into our stores and actually speak to our staff members. So that's our journey. So what happened in L&D? Well, this is what was supposed to happen. So I was very busy pulling together a customer experience program, which was going to be a wonderful blended journey with lots of face-to-face workshops. There'd be virtual workshops, there'd be discussion forums, e-learning, the whole thing, ready to launch at the May National Conference, which of course, nada, didn't happen. All right. I've actually just today got the invite for next year's conference. So they're very hopeful that we can get together next year. I also had many Situational Leadership 2 workshops in planning and just about ready to go with those. So I had, probably 60, 65 people booked into those, ready to go. And of course, they all had to be pulled. Bringing together or writing, designing, developing a manager development program, because we can have situational leadership, but we need some more skills around situational leadership, and we need to support our customer experience program, and we need really strong, successful store managers to be able to do that. And then the last one was all about health and safety, and getting a nice, consistent health and safety training program right across the network, because up until that point, it had been fairly left alone for the store owners to actually pull their health and safety programs together. So COVID hit and I went, what the? And I was one of those people that went, okay, I'm not out in public, I'm home, and I've been home for, I don't know, since March, late March, early April. And I am Zoom fatigued like everybody else, and I'm ready to get back to the office next week. So what actually happened? I had to change my whole timeline to then create programs around COVID, around working from home, around wellbeing, mental health, safe plans, resilience, all of those things, those necessary things that people either needed for information or needed for support. Because quite often, with the store owners concerned about their business, particularly in the early stages of both lockdowns, they weren't there for their team members to support them effectively. I also took everything virtual. So everything, I had created a whole e-learning platform when I started, but situational leadership, for example, was all very much face-to-face. And I took that virtual and took as much as I could virtual, which meant that not only was I in Zoom meetings, I was constantly online conducting trainings pretty much all day, every day. And I actually took on a HR role instead of an L&D role. I had to become that person that they could call and talk to, not only about, needing that support and the resilience and everything, but also I was getting queries about, well, this person was in performance management before we went into lockdown. What do I do with that now? How do I work with that person? How do we do this? So I had to very quickly refine my HR skills and get them back up to speed. I haven't been in HR for a while. And start working through that information with them. But on the plus side of that, it's also given me a lot of really good content curation for my manager development program. So, nothing is going to waste with the pivot that I've had to do. The one thing that went absolutely 100% on time to plan was the health and safety program, because that was all online. It was all from a curated supplier of health and safety. And I'm very pleased to say, with particularly with the Melbourne Metro lockdown, that we now have 40% completion rates right across the board of 5 compulsory health and safety modules. So yay, something actually that was on my KPIs got ticked off. One thing. So that's sort of what the year pivoted to. My lessons in all of that is very much along the same lines as the others. It's about that human. It's about you have to stop and you have to listen, and you have to really build those relationships. I have relationships now with store owners that I was actually quite scared of previously, and I wouldn't pick up the phone and talk to them because they were just really scary, grumpy old men, basically. And now I have these really fantastic relationships that, they call me and say, oh, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. And we have we've got a really good, strong, friendly relationship, and they now listen to what I have to say. So for me, it's been a really powerful way of bringing that network together. I fully support that, get comfortable with the discomfort, because it's not going away. It's here to stay. And even though change is constant and we all think that we manage change well, let's be honest, nobody really manages change that well. And we all hate being in that space, but let's just get comfortable with it. Let's work through it, which brings me to one of my philosophies, which is about staying curious. If you stay curious. If people ask you something and you don't know, get out there and find the answer, because it's all out there. I was listening to a Facebook group challenge yesterday about building clients, which, I don't need to do. I'm not in that space, but there's a lot of you that are. You should probably be on it. And they were talking about, this database warehouse, Answer the Public, I think it's called. And you go in there and it's got all of this information, right, that people may ask you questions about if you type in your specific industry. So get curious, stay curious, and go digging deep. And for me, I think I wouldn't have been able to achieve what I've done, particularly with those COVID-related programs that I had to pull together, if I couldn't curate the content. So there's been so much, free curation out there that you can just pick up and just put into your learning platform, and it just goes, which was fantastic for me because I didn't have to read through all of the paraphernalia about COVID and understand all of the regulations and all of the differences between the states and then between metro and regional here in Melbourne. And it gets very complicated. So it's, curation is absolutely key in this business. But the last thing is I fully support Nigel. I think you said that opportunity to push back. I kept on saying to people, is this really a training need? Do you really need a piece of training for this? Or can we just put together a cheat sheet or a job aid? Or, is it a problem with the process or the manager? So we really got into some better, deeper conversations around, whether it's actually a training need or not. And I think, apart from everything else, please go out and support your local 40 Wink store. Get a bed match profile. It'll tell you what your correct support is, which is all about sleeping.
Enough plugs, Deb.
You all need to, sleep is the most important thing. And we're serious about sleep. So you've got to go into 40 Winks and get profiled, and we'll look after you.
All right. Thanks, Deb. You can stop sharing there now. Yeah. As you can hear, everyone, people get excited about what they're doing and where they're at and things like that. So we're now down to our last presenter, and then I'm going to have an open forum. And in this case, it's Malcolm Simister. And one of the things that I wanted when I was talking to Malcolm about these things is I'd seen him in our members lounge throughout the year, and the growth and the change of what he was doing. But then when we had our conversation, about what it was that this year has meant to him, it was a surprise. And I wanted him to share that story with us because I think it's just a completely different kind of an approach. So Malcolm, you've shared your screen, but it seems to be blank. Is that okay?
That's okay. It is blank at the moment.
All right, excellent stuff. So over to you, my friend, and give you about 10 minutes.
Thank you, Bill. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Malcolm Simister, chartered accountant, started out life with what's now KPMG, spent 12 years in senior finance positions in industry, started my own consulting and training business back in 2003, and I've deliberately morphed that into a training with a bit of consulting on the side business. Earlier this year, my wife and I were designing to retire. She retired a couple of years ago, and I was intending to retire this year as well. And our retirement present was to rent an apartment in Paris. And by an apartment, I mean a shoebox in Paris, where we were going to go for April, May, June, and then go and live in the UK for a while, for a number of years. And that all sort of came to a grinding halt. We'd tarted up our house, we'd found someone to rent it, we got rid of the car, we'd sold stuff in a garage sale, we'd done everything we needed to do, and then we were locked down. My training work had basically dried up because I'd said to clients, look, I'm going to retire, and so that was that. As a bit of background to all this, of the retirement thing, I think this is what Bill was alluding to. You have to go back about 6 years. My wife and I, we decided we wanted to live life again. 2 of our 3 sons had left home. The third was at uni and independent. And so we said, okay, now what the hell did we used to do on Saturday night? And we decided to go out and live life again. We both wanted to travel. We both wanted to go and live in the UK. And the thing was to find a way of doing it affordably. We weren't going to emigrate, or me, in my case, go back to the UK. We wanted to do affordably, to live in the UK for several months each year. And we both hit on the idea of a narrowboat. Now, I'm willing to bet that most of you, in fact, probably all of you, have not been on a narrowboat. Some of you have probably not even heard of one. So this is what a narrowboat looks like. That's our boat. It's called Idle Jack. It's called a narrowboat because it's narrow. Some of the locks on the 2,000 miles of canals and navigable rivers in Britain are very narrow. And so our boat is 7 feet wide, which is a bit over 2 meters. And this one is 60 feet long, about 18.5 meters long. Just to give you a quick rundown on the boat, you stand at the back with the tiller, you're standing on top of the diesel engine. Then coming forward in the boat is the kitchen. We don't call it a galley, it's a kitchen, where we have a gas hob, a gas cooker, a fridge and a washing machine. Then we have the dinette, where there's a dining table which converts into another berth at night. A little living area where we've got 2 easy chairs, a colour telly, and a coal stove. When the coal stove is going, it heats the whole boat, but we've also got diesel-fired central heating. Then there's a bathroom with a loo, shower and wash basin, and then our bedroom. And Deb would be horrified to know, it's certainly not a 40 winks bed, Deb. Our bed is about 4 feet wide, so a bit over 1 meter wide, so it gets pretty cozy at night. And then the canvas area at the front of the boat there, that's not called the bow, that's called the cratch. And we use that for storing things and for drying clothes. So that's our boat. That's how we've lived for the last 6 years or so. Every year we've gone over 2 months of the stretch to live on the boat. When I did this initially, I went to my clients. I was scared of losing work and losing income. But my point of view is life is for living. It's not for making money. And so I went to my clients and said, look, I'm not going to be available for May and June and September, October each year. Is that okay? And without exception, they said, yes, of course, that's fine. Just tell us when you're available. And so I've been very lucky. My clients schedule work around my lifestyle, although I do work on the boat, still do, we're internet connected. Just give you a bit more idea of the lifestyle on the boat. That's in the center of Birmingham. The center of Birmingham now, the canals have been refurbished. There's bars, pubs, restaurants. It's fabulous there now. But you can also moor in the middle of nowhere. And this is at a place called Fotheringay. If you picture London, go about 80 miles north, you hit Peterborough, turn left and go down a bit and you come to Fotheringay. It's on the River Nene, and this was an absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous mooring spot, that beautiful bridge. Up to the left was a big church. We're on the edge of the village where there was a good pub. What else could you possibly want? And one of the things I love about England is that almost everywhere you go, there is something of historic interest. And what happened here back in 1587 was that there used to be a castle beyond that bridge, Fotheringay Castle, and that's where Mary, Queen of Scots, was beheaded. Her body was taken up to the church. It lay there for a couple of days. Then they stuffed her into Peterborough Cathedral, and now she's interred in Westminster Abbey. So that was our mooring spot for that particular night. If you look here, this is another in the middle of nowhere mooring spot. We're on our way to Stratford-on-Avon here. Stratford-on-Avon has got a big canal basin on the fringe of the town centre, and it's right next to the Royal Shakespeare Company Theatre, and you can moor there for free for several days. And we were going down the canal, the sun was getting low, and we thought, well, we've done enough for the day, let's just moor up. And so we moored up alongside the towpath in the middle of nowhere here, opened a bottle, had dinner, it was just magnificent. But perhaps the best boating experience we've had was in Cambridge, on the River Cam. During the summer months, the River Cam is full of punts, so that somebody standing on the back of a frail wooden boat with a long pole pushing the boat along. And this River Cam here, it goes through the backs of the colleges. So it backs, King's College, for example, backs onto the river. There's the chapel there, there's the magnificent lawn there, and other colleges back onto the river too. But in the winter months, from October through to March, you're allowed to take your boat, a powered craft, up through this part of the river. And so we took Idle Jack up there. It was a magnificent experience. Had to be extremely careful not to prang any punts and sink them. It would have been very easy, because Idle Jack is made of steel and weighs about 20 tons, whereas a punt is made of pretty frail wood and doesn't weigh very much at all. And we were just coming up here in this picture to the Bridge of Sighs. It doesn't look very high, but that was probably the highest bridge we went under. The lowest bridge was Kitchen Bridge, and I think we got under it by about 2 inches to spare. So look, this has been our lifestyle for the last 6 years. Every May, June and September, October, we've gone over to the UK, potted around the canals and the rivers on our boat and loved it. And I stay connected with my clients. And one time we moored at a place called Napton on the Oxford Canal. And there was zero mobile connection. And I had a conference call the following morning with some clients back in Australia. So the following morning, I was on the hill, in Napton on the Hill it's called. I was in the church porch watching the sun coming up with a conference call to my client in Melbourne and the client I was going to deliver the workshop to in Perth. Neither of them knew where I were. I could have been in Australia for all they knew. They didn't really care. And I got back to the boat, tailored my workshop material, emailed it off, and a couple of weeks later, I was delivering my workshop in Perth. So that's the background to what we wanted to do. We both wanted to go and do more of this stuff back in the UK for another few years. We have a saying, which I think is probably prescient this year: do it while you can. We meant it, do it while you can, because our health is still good, so we can do most things we want to do. But I also say JFDI, just do it. Just do it. If you want to do it, just do it. Money does not get in the way. I promise you, whatever you want to do, if you want to do it badly enough, you will find the money. So what else do I do? Going back to March this year, we were going to go over to the UK and Paris, suddenly couldn't go. So what do? Kicked my heels for a couple of weeks and thought, well, this is my opportunity to start up the online training business I'd wanted to start up for quite a while. Rather stupidly, I hadn't done much research, had no idea really how to do it. And I went through a hell of a learning journey. I had to find out what things like search engine optimization meant and what websites really should look like, because I had absolutely no idea. I'd never had to really worry about this sort of stuff because I just delivered face-to-face, or when I delivered a webinar, it was at a client's premises. It really didn't worry me too much. But suddenly it was all down to me, and I had to find out how you actually design online things rather than face-to-face. It was a whole new world for me, and it took me a long time. I went down a lot of blind alleys, but now I think I've got it running pretty well. I got somebody else to design and build the website for me, and so that's my website. It's now up and running. It's called Financial Statements in Plain English, an awful mouthful, finstatsplain.com.au. There are 6 courses designed to help business managers understand their finances. 5 of the 6 courses are live now. The 6th will go live in a couple of weeks' time. And then I've got to get on and market these courses because nobody knows this exists. And so Julie Mason does some great marketing techniques using LinkedIn. I'll certainly be doing her course and some other courses as well. I've got to know how to use Google properly. I'm still on this very steep learning curve. But I've got a huge satisfaction out of it as well, because without this, I think mentally I would have deteriorated. This has really kept me challenged mentally. It's kept me alive. It's kept me curious as to know how on earth you do these things, and the immense satisfaction I've got out of finding out something or other and making it work, and the satisfaction I got of actually putting the first course up there on Learn World so people can access it. I got my sons to have a look at it and my wife and some friends. So it's been a completely different year for me. From going earlier in this year to wanting to retire and looking forward to that, to, well, still being in business. This retirement thing, I mean, personally, I don't recommend it. It really is boring, I think, retiring. You've got to have something to do. Somebody sent me a film clip which featured Clint Eastwood, and he says, don't let the old man in. Clint Eastwood is in his 80s. He's still directing and acting in films. He doesn't let the old man in. He just carries on. And that's what I intend to do. If I'm as active as Clint is when I'm his age, then I'll be well satisfied. So I guess my learning from all this is that you just do it. For goodness sake, just do it. You have to make the best of whatever opportunity is there. Nobody wants to be in COVID. None of us wanted the GFC. None of us wanted the recession we had to have back in the early 1990s. But hey, we're here. That's it. You've got to cope with it. You've got to accept it. And so just make the best of it. And as I say, don't wait around for something to happen. I'm not religious, so I'm not collecting points to go to heaven. This is it. This ain't a dress rehearsal. I've got to do it now. And I want to be on my deathbed saying, I'm glad I did, not I wish I had. So my message to everybody is make the best of this. Learn what you can from it. Our lives have changed, undoubtedly, in all sorts of ways. But I'm actually really excited about what's going to happen when we come out of all this, and we will. So I say again to you, do it while you can. JFDI, just do it. Thank you, Bill.
Okay, one of the things I was saying is that throughout this year, I've seen Malcolm become more and more involved with ILP and the stuff we learned. And I know when Carrie and I, when the first lockdown hit, one of the things we did is we pivoted to, for instance, these fortnightly masterclasses, which have been, I think, a good success. We also put up the free area of tools to thrive and survive, where things like Lyndall's accessibility webinar that she did for Design Week was one of the first things we went up there. And there's a whole range of things. And I think one of the things that I like about all this is that we've been able to help each other so much, and the stories, I think, are there. So what I'd like to do now is just throw it open to anybody, and I think just maybe put a little thumbs up or something like that in the box if you'd like to speak, just a little thumbs up thing, or wave to me or something like that. And then just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask any questions of any of the speakers we had, or share something from your own situation that we have. We have about 10 minutes to go before we have to sort of call it quits in terms of the time that we schedule. But of course, we can keep going if people want to. So over to you guys. First of all, was this valuable? And how what would you like to share with us? Okay, we'll just end the session there then.
Obviously, no one else is going to say anything at the moment, Bill. So I just like to say something I should have said in my presentation then. I found being involved with the ILP immensely useful. The generosity of people in sharing their knowledge, the things I've learned from ILP people, you know, it's been incredible. It's extraordinary. And if I can put anything back into the ILP, then I'm very, very happy to do so. If anybody else wants to know anything about canal boating, please contact me privately. I'll bore you witless with endless stories about canal boats. Or if you want to know about financial statements and do my courses, please let me know, and I'll give you a very, very good rate for it, like pretty zero. Okay.
We always like something free from an accountant. Sally, I see you're unmuted there. What did you like to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to, even though I was one of the speakers, it was, oh, sorry, trying to get the thumb down. I was just want to say how much I appreciate hearing the different perspectives, and I think it reinforces just how different our journeys are, even though we fall under this beautiful banner of learning and development, facilitation, and learning professionals, and no one journey is, you know, one size fits all is just absolutely not true in this game. And so I just want to say thank you, because sharing some of the tough stuff in an environment where maybe we've got to keep a brave face on, and how's business? Oh, business is fine, you know, I'm very busy. Well, hasn't COVID turned that around? And so thank you to everyone who has shared.
Thanks for that. Liz, I see you've turned yourself on. Liz is, I met her early this year or late last year when we moved to Geelong, and she was the host for the Geelong NAB Village. And she's been out there, obviously locked down as well. Did you want to share something with us?
Yeah, I actually wanted to reiterate what Sally said and thank everyone for sharing so honestly, because often people don't, and I think it makes everyone kind of feel, okay, yeah, you know, we've all gone through things, and I know, you know, I have my own business, but I also work in a corporate, so in some ways I've been sheltered from a lot of the financial impacts. But even just acknowledging the others, whether you run a business or you've worked in corporate, we've all been impacted. So I just want to acknowledge everyone who shared today and say thank you.
Yeah, and I know, Liz, you've been out talking to a lot of the NAB Village members and things like that. And I know that between the two of us, we've connected with a range of different people, and Lyndall's involved as well, et cetera. So it's been a truly community kind of process as well, which is something I wouldn't have expected as well. And there's people that have been impacted that we can help in different ways. Carrie, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Oh, okay, what's new? Thank you.
Well, you know, this year began with you making really, end of last year and the beginning of this year, a lot of changes to what you wanted to do with ILP. The Cert 4, the certifications, the capability framework, all of those kind of things. And then suddenly this all started to happen, and you already had 15 different things going on. Just in a couple of minutes, what lesson would you have that I haven't already given you in terms of my own advice to you?
I have the difficulty one because, and I love what people have been saying about how ILP has been supporting them, because that's, to me, means so much, and that's what we're all about, is to support L&D professionals. What it's taught me is to focus. I tend to, one of these people, oh, look at that pretty butterfly over there, we should do that, Bill, and we should do that. So we've been juggling an awful lot and trying to have events and connect people. So to have somebody like Bill behind the scenes that's now being able to help focus, but also the L&D Masterclasses, and it's getting back to bare bones. When I first started ILP, I had this idea to raise the bar and lift the standards with learning and development, but got sidetracked. And if anything, with COVID, it's helped me to become more focused. And I've actually gone back to where ILP originally started, which was to raise the bar within learning and development and to connect people. So with what we've got coming up with the certification, the new Cert 4 in learning design and facilitation, which will be launching next year, really is going to set the standard for learning and development and help corporate L&D so they don't have to do the TAE anymore as the industry standard, as well as the capabilities. So we've done a lot of research and established what the capabilities are. We've done it mainly for individuals, but we're actually now have set the standards for organisations. So we've actually in development at the moment on an assessment platform for the capabilities they need to build their learning culture, their strategy, all of that. And the aim is for us to work, well, not just for ILP to work with the organisations, but certify our members so that they can support the corporates, and we sort of become the conduit between our members and creating opportunities and supporting corporates to build their learning initiatives and getting the results that they want to achieve. So I love how we've sort of done a bit of a, okay, let's stop, refocus, and now we're sort of back to where ILP basically began 13 years ago.
Yeah, that's great. And we have lots of things coming up, everyone. It's just, it's been incredible stuff that you're going to see coming up over the next little while. Amy, you'd like to share something? Absolutely.
Thank you, Bill. I'd like to simply say a little hello. I recently joined ILP after a 20-year career or so in learning and development and organisational development, both from a corporate perspective, a professional perspective, and in more recent times running my own business. So this is my very first event. Thank you for having me. It's been delightful to hear from 5 fellow L&D professionals' personal journeys. I've been making notes here. Also acknowledge I did have my camera off for some of it, which isn't my preference, of course. I do have 2 young children running around in the background here somewhere. So a warm hello, and once again, thank you for having me.
Thank you for that. And one of the things you can do, Amy, is in the under L&D resources on the website, we have all of the master classes available and recorded for you to share and things like that. Just before we go on any further, could I do a screenshot of everybody, and if those people who aren't on video, if you maybe come on to video, that would be great. If you can't, then that's okay, but do what Sally's doing, is perk up your hair and get everything looking good, and I'll do a quick screenshot. So thumbs up or big smile, whatever it is you want, that'd be great. 1, 2, 3. Got it. Okay, thank you, everyone. All right, over to finish off, if anybody wants to add anything in this last couple of minutes.
Doesn't look like it.
Bernice, did you want to say something?
Yeah, sorry, I was just waiting to see if anybody else took themselves off mute.
No, that's okay.
I'll echo what everybody else has said. It's been great for everyone to share their experiences. I am kind of like Deb. I'm the only person doing the L&D piece where I work, and I'm quite new to that level of L&D. I came up as a site trainer sharing skills in our environment. So it's been really nice to see that even though everybody's from a different background in what they're teaching and developing people in, that we all have a very similar connection in that we want to do the best for everybody that we're working with. But I think a really big thing that I've taken out of it is how important we are in change management, and how we can actually support our organizations or clients in that. So thank you, everybody. It's been great.
Thank you, Bernie. That's terrific. And one of the things I would suggest is, or say, I've already planning 2021 masterclasses. I've already got our January 27th one set up, which is going to be looking at one of our life fellows. Is going to be, he's in the motivational field, so I've asked him to speak about life motivators and things like that. So as we kick off the year, and I've got a range of other topics that I'll be putting out to people to say, hey, here's some topics, which ones would you like? So if you see any surveys coming through on that in the next few weeks, please respond to it and let me know, because I want to create an environment where we're not just talking COVID, we're actually sharing things as we move through. The other thing I'm thinking about doing in next year's masterclasses is we generally have that first hour for the feature presenters, and then we have the last 20 minutes, 25 minutes, where we actually can do something different. We have a slightly different change. And I'm thinking about doing two things. One, asking members to put forward something that they could do, excuse me, for just 10 minutes. Or do an introduction to what they're doing, so we actually get to know more members on the master classes and find out what they're doing, and run a little activity for us or something like that. So I'm looking for new ways of doing things, and maybe looking for some help from some people to help me organize and manage these things, because I don't need to do it all myself. I love to get collaboration in there. So if anybody wants to connect with me on that, please do so. The last thing we want to have is, you're going to see something very shortly that's going to be open for L&D professionals, and it's all based around our capability framework. So we're putting together a 3-day showcase, and it's going to be, I think, probably the best event in L&D this year. So keep your eye open for that, and be sure to join in on that if you can. And remember, for members, our professional members, master classes, all the resources, everything we do is available to you. So so have a look at our website if you haven't been on there in recent days, and stay with us. So I think, Carrie, I will turn it over to you to close up and stop the recording.
All right, thanks, Bill. Basically, not much more to say, but just thank you everyone for joining us, and for those lovely kind words that everybody has shared about ILP and the masterclasses. Really appreciate that. What we would like is, if you get an opportunity to shoot through an email, I've got Bill's email address in the chat box. But I've been told by our new marketing person that we should be capturing any of these testimonials or short videos about that. So if you do have time, if you can shoot us a quick testimonial, that would be brilliant. But we are going to continue to look for opportunities to connect our members and help develop their capabilities. So feedback is always welcome. If there's anything else you believe that we could be doing, please let us know, but we're here to support you. And please stay safe, take care. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Thank you to our 5 facilitators to share their various stories, which were all very interesting. And for Bill, once again, for hosting. So thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, Kerry.
Thanks, team. Cheers.
Thanks, Bill.
Cheers, everyone. Fantastic.